So my name's Jewell, I'm a physiotherapist. I work at Recovery Room, Physiotherapy and Performance. I'm also involved with the Otago Nuggets and look after the junior Tall Blacks. The Otago Nuggets role came up when I moved south. I was lucky enough to have a meeting with Brent Matihide, and we kind of clicked, and was just lucky that he brought me on board with the team, with him and Mike Spencer as a strength and conditioning coach. And yeah, since then it's been an awesome environment to work in, and a great group of lads to be part of their first campaign, which was a championship campaign, and then the last couple of years not quite so successful, but still really enjoyable, and a great group of guys to work with. So I suppose elite basketball players, obviously in basketball in general, ankle, knee, hip and groin, and shoulder challenges. They have to rapidly decelerate, accelerate, jump, land, change direction, and obviously be very skillful and accurate with their upper limb mechanics. So we spend a lot of time in the weight room, guided by Mike Spencer from Valley S&C at the Jump Lab, and I can kind of support that with any injuries or specific stuff that guys need on top of the team programming. Yeah, so I think a big part of what I would see from a clinic environment in terms of people's programming or strength training issues is number one, lack of calf training. Number two, lack of multi-directional training. So we're pretty good at training vertical. Sometimes we get a bit horizontal, but very rarely we're training laterally, and very rarely we're training backwards. And I think we've got to think about preparing ourselves for the sport or task that we're aiming to do well at, whether it's performance-based sport, whether that's reducing injury, or whether that's just being effective at home with the kids. In terms of injury prevention, I think good strength training in multiple planes and multiple spectrums, including plyometrics, moving fast as well as moving slow, is a big thing people can do to reduce the risk of injury. So I'd explain plyometrics as rapidly stretching and shortening of a musculotendinous unit. Think about running, think about jumping. And sometimes when we talk about plyometrics, we're actually just training a part of that. We're training part of a jump or part of a landing, and then when you put those together, it becomes plyometric. So even though we're calling it plyometric training, we might only be training phases of that, and that phase might be dependent on where they're at in their recovery, injury, or performance pathway. Well, I suppose if you look at athletic performance, often what separates a good player from a great player is the ability to rapidly create space, whether that's cutting and changing direction, suddenly stepping back, and the faster you can do that, the more effective you can be as an athlete. And therefore, if you can train some of that speed and plyometric attribute in the gym in a safe, controlled environment, that reflects a greater ability to do it, and with maybe more effect on the field or court, or wherever you might be trying to perform. So I would recommend short, sharp plyometric doses prior to training or prior to play. It prepares you well for the action. It could be part of your warm-up, it could be part of your individual session or part of your team warm-up to prepare you to perform at your best. So I suppose one of the key risks of plyometrics is the fact that they take time to recover from. So what I wouldn't recommend doing is having plyometrics every single day in your program, but rather periodizing your program with the mixed methods of strength and plyometric training, and trying to sequence that in with your high-low day. For example, doing your plyometrics on your high running, jumping, change direction day, like a training or a game day, and then having a strength session on a non-training day, or just alternating on those if you're training on field or on court every day. So I hope people take away a concept of plyometric training and how it might be able to help them both from a performance perspective and an injury prevention perspective. I hope that they can take away some ideas around how they can help their athletes to perform better and have a lower injury risk, especially coaches implementing neuromuscular training and maybe plyometric training before trainings and games to help prepare the athletes for the demands of sport better. I think I would advise young athletes to spend the time moving heavily and slow and well in the gym to build tolerance and capacity for the demands of their sport, as well as implementing some short, sharp plyometric principles before their trainings and games, so that when they hit the field, they're best prepared to play and perform at their best, as well as hopefully reduce the risk of injury. Now, I would say that I'm just passionate about sharing information, collaborating, working with different people, and I just suppose trying to improve community outcomes, both for keeping people engaged in sports they enjoy, improving performance and outcomes for people in the communities, and effectively the flow-on effect that it has for the wider community in terms of health, well-being and happiness. Working on limitations, I'll just speak to this first because this is a really good paper that came out last year. I think all of you are in a fortunate environment. You're in a gym environment and you're in you're involved with strength training already. But across the board, what we see in the research and in clinic is that females are overrepresented both in burden of injury, so longer term injury, and also recurrence of injury. And again, the ACL, so ACL rupture is where a lot of the research happens because it takes time, it costs money, and it's prevalent in the highly funded sports like football, AFL, rugby. As I said earlier, there's a lack of data specific to female athletes. One of the things which is interesting, there's more and more research looking at metabolic processes, effect of the menstrual cycle, hormonal changes and how that might reflect injury. There's been a lack of research into how society affects outcomes which might affect injury, and a big one is looking at the effects of simple strength training. So if you give a group of footballers a simple preparation plan like a FIFA 11 Plus, or the basketball version is called Tread, they have a massive increase in resilience. They don't get injured as much. And that probably means that it's because they're not exposed to strength training as much, generally. Does that make sense? So if you have a group that don't do much strength training through lots of factors, and you give them some, they respond really well and have less injuries, as opposed to, say, males who are more likely to be in the gym. They respond well, but not as well, because there's less effect of that training. And if we look at why that might be, we think probably that, look, the gym environments generally are quite gendered towards males. And so we just need to acknowledge and focus on creating environments that are more welcoming and open to different groups, diverse groups, different genders. If we have injury, we often in the clinic will assess the current capacity with strength testing, with plyometric testing on force plates or a dynamometer. And then we want to understand what the required capacity is. Now, we're fortunate that we're getting more and more what's called normative data, so research that tells us how strong a certain athlete should be. We now have numbers of percent body weight, so our quad strength on a knee extension test, we're about 90% body weight for a direction change sport. And it's relative to body weight because the mass that the knee or leg is carrying is obviously relative to how much work the knee has to do. So therefore, if I'm 100 kilos, I'm going to need more mass to manage my force than someone who's 50 kilos. And this is a really nice but busy slide to indicate how long it takes to recover from demands. So if we think about walking and running, for sort of the bone and the cartilage that responds quickly, isometrics in a couple of hours, you're kind of sorted. Tendon loading takes about 24 hours to get better from. As we move into more explosive and plyometric activities like sprinting, it takes 72 hours to recover. It's quite a long time, so 3 days. So if you're sprinting Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, the likelihood of you getting a hamstring tendinopathy or getting a hamstring strain, if you're not well conditioned, it gets kind of higher and higher and higher. As I said before, all people are different people, and some people are conditioned to that and manage that really well. Other people need to modify their training loads based on what works for them. But this is some examples of how long it takes to recover, which can help inform you how I should do this and why I should do this. I talked before about normative data. So we now have growing research around how much is enough capacity-wise. Again, predominantly males, predominantly elite athletes. Coming back to speed versus, say, volume in this example, marathon runners versus sprinters. Sprinters should have twice body weight for a seated calf raise isometric test, so just max push against a load cell. They should be able to punch about twice body weight per leg, whereas your long distance runners don't need quite as much because they don't have as much force, although they have a high load of duration and volume. That short, sharp ground contact in running is much higher force, and you need more to deal with it. Same principles in rugby players. This doesn't come out that well. Forwards versus backs, right? Forwards are big and heavy, but backs move faster. Forwards need 1.75 times body weight, backs twice body weight. So again, the same principles we're hearing across track and field research, across rugby research, that the faster you go, the more capacity you need to manage your mass at speed to not get injured and or to perform well. Who trains bent knee calf raise? Put your hand up. 2, 3. Who trains straight knee calf raise? No one? 2, 3. So one of my bugbears is that no one trains bent knee calf raise. So if you look at the running, so this is body weight, so times body weight in running. So we said that horizontal hops, was it 32, 38 times body weight? Single leg hop on the Achilles is about 15. Just running, each landing for the short calf, 8 times body weight. Long calf, 3 times, quad, 4, glutes, not much. So if we look at this is running loads times body weight at different speeds. Soleus is consistently 2.5 times higher force than gastro. So your long calf. So if you're training long calf, that's your gastro. Doesn't do as much work as your bent knee short calf. When you're landing and decelerating, your short calf is your big support for your knee. So your short calf helps decelerate your tibia. And if you look at the thing of ACL risk, it's the tibia gliding forward. And so if we don't have that soleus or short calf underneath supporting, that's when we see that tibia translating forward and potentially ACL going. So it's incredibly important. And I'll always ask people, like if they say they go to the gym or if they've got an S&C program, I want to know every single movement, and I would very rarely not have someone doing a bent knee calf raise as part of the rehab. In terms of, doesn't get much better form-wise. But again, the thing to look at here is his catch. So barbell's flying up, and this is power, 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 and then he's got to get under this, decelerate the bar, so bar's going to start falling there, and now he's got to decelerate with the shoulder, so he's decelerating, 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 and driving out. So that's where, again, I know you guys don't train like this, but if you did this sport and all you did was short lever, push-pull, you wouldn't be prepared for long lever patterns. And again, where I'd argue it's really helpful to have some kind of fly training, both in a slow heavy as well as drop catch principles to generate force rapidly to prepare for that catch. There's no basketballers here, but we can enjoy this. This always looks calm because you're so good, but just acceleration, deceleration, step back, scores. So we create space by rapidly moving forward, rapidly moving backwards. So that's that patellar tendon load, rapid step back, forwards back, money. Does anyone follow NBA? Yeah. So the other thing is just the volume of Achilles ruptures we had this final season. So there was, I'll just show you the mechanics. Step back, Achilles gone, step back, Achilles gone, step back, Achilles gone. All the same pattern, step back, Achilles gone. So that's the stretch shortening cycle resulting in catastrophic injury. Stretch back, shorten.
With the rugby players or anything that's on the offensive side and they're using explosion off the step, do they train the opposite when they're on defense? Because a lot of the time I saw them, they get caught off guard and then they get caught with their reaction, but they're not exploding backwards.
Yeah, so decelerating,
Yeah, and is there like any, do they train that or are they mostly training on the offensive side?
Well, so on field, yes. But that's where, again, I think in the weight room, there's a lack of even, like a backwards lunge is a foundation for deceleration. Yeah. So if I'm coming forward and coming backwards, we train mostly vertical. Again, and that's when I comment about, is a back squat enough? We train sometimes horizontally in a sled push or maybe a horizontal lunge, but very rarely are we going backwards.
That had the correlation with like Torres Halliburton when he was going backwards in the cycle.
Yeah, and then again, patellar rupture is a deceleration step back. ACL is typically deceleration change direction. So there's all these patterns of decelerations being an issue, and as a performance benefit to create space if you're a three-point shooter or a step, but we just don't see it happening in the gym as much. And so that's where, again, because I'm looking at it as a rehab professional who's seeing injury and then trying to prepare them for the sport, I'm looking at it backwards, like what do you do? How do I prepare you for that? What I'm hoping to do is help people prepare to then not be there. So to bring that information back and say, how can you train so that you can manage those forces? And that's where, again, like we said with that horizontal deceleration, that's 38 times body weight. How much is that? Probably a little bit more because I'm having to rapidly decelerate and push backwards.
Yeah, it would be interesting even to see like something like the NFL players that are on the defensive side of the ball where they're just training going backwards the whole time compared to the offensive.
And looking at different fatigue outputs in quads and that kind of carry on, looking at, because we know that through the course of like tackling forces reduce with a game of rugby, running backwards no doubt will reduce quads force output and therefore they're more at risk of knee injury. All those things will play into it. So again, it's just thinking about what's the demand of the sport, how do you prepare for it, to keep it as simple as possible. That's what I'm trying to stress here is, one, can you move faster in the weight room to prepare? Two, can you move in multiple planes and spectrums that prepare you for those demands?